On a crowded and bustling street in the city center, Tan Huang Duan was standing on a traffic light pole. He looked out at the high-rise buildings in the distance and said softly, "My great-grandmother is gone." Unexpectedly, more than 2,000 years later, summer flowers will look like this. The passers-by below saw this scene and were surprised to take out their phones to film and take pictures. They whispered and discussed, "Is this a costume? Which film crew is the actor running to? Is there a boy?" He pulled his father's hand beside him, raised his hand and said, "Dad, there's Qin Shi Huang." A few girls looked up and blushed and exclaimed, "He's so handsome." The commander with long hair and a dark royal robe heard these words from above. He crossed his arms over his chest, frowned and said blandly, as if he felt like he was wasting time here, the main camp stomped his foot and his whole body immediately flew straight up. When the people below saw this, they cried out in horror, "How can you still fly? Oh my God, this is not scientific." The chief used his air force to fly higher and higher, far away from the skyscrapers here. He looked down and muttered, "I am the chief, also a Qin emperor, practicing in the fairy world, 1,000 years, now returning to the human world. In the 37th year of the millennium, when my illness was critical, I drank the immortal elixir prepared by Tu Fuk, then my soul emerged, transformed into the body of an ancestral dragon and flew up. Time travel to the fairy world beyond the stars, practice for 2,000 years. Sweeping across the 8 wastelands of the fairy world, opening up the territory of the Great Qin, absorbing the fortunes of the world, and finally unifying the entire fairy world, not long after being crowned emperor. I flew through the sky again, rushed straight to the heavenly realm, at the last moment of success, was secretly attacked by the outside world, my life was in danger, but at the moment of death, a mysterious power appeared, present, teleporting my body to the earth and flowers. Although he was lucky to survive, his cultivation level fell to the foundation stage, and everything had to be done from scratch. But the natural spiritual energy of the human world is extremely fragile. It is difficult to increase your strength. If you want to speed up your practice, you can only hunt and kill monsters, or absorb heavenly treasures. The road is long and far away. I hope that they will protect the fairy world well and not let the devil invade the territory of the Great Qin. Waiting for the day when I return to the peak, I will surely ascend to the throne of the fairy world, and join the generals in defeating the demons." The main camp thought while walking around in the air. At this moment, a sudden change occurred in front of him. He frowned and thought warily. It was a fluctuation of spiritual energy. Could it be that there was a monk fighting here? At this time underground, in another part of the city, a giant monster with bloodshot eyes was constantly chasing the people. They ran away in fear, screaming, "Run fast, monsters are coming, help." This monster is a level A monster, a giant beast. In the southern mountain capital there is a beast. Its shape is like a goat and has white ears, runs quite fast when there are people walking around, often called quat. Suddenly, this monster opened its mouth full of hideous sharp teeth and roared loudly, scaring the people below into running away. At this moment, a group of students from Tianjlan Academy appeared to block this monster. The head student, Lam Tian Tuat, held a precious sword in his hand, leading the group to shout, "This is a monster, the reward is 20 million, everyone must try to kill it." The people following heard this and replied in unison. Lam Tian Tuat held the sword tightly in her hand. The cold light on the sword's body was constantly flowing. She took the lead, rushing towards the standing monster. Each cold sword slashed at the giant beast's huge body. It angrily opened its mouth and spit out a bright red flame. A person saw this and quickly shouted, "Tian Tuat, quickly take the opportunity to cut it to death. Victory or defeat is decided here." Lam Tian Tuat thought so, then quickly swung his sword and rushed forward. Seeing the danger, the giant beast roared loudly. It used more force to spit out red fire, hitting straight towards the group of defending students. This power was too terrible. This group of students cried out in terror, "Not good, the barrier has been broken." Lam Tian Tuat stared blankly at the fire hitting her sword. She didn't have time to react, her mind only had time to think, the speed is too fast. Right after that, the giant beast gained the upper hand, sending the group of students flying dozens of meters away. Each scream rang out continuously. Lin Tian Tuyat's agile body flipped around in the air. Then she firmly planted the sword in her hand on the ground to regain balance. She coughed loudly, her beautiful face drenched in sweat, thinking to herself, "The giant beast is much stronger than she imagined. I'm afraid today will be the day. I'll have to lie down here." The giant beast followed the momentum step by step towards the position of the group of students who were knocked down. These people quickly helped each other up, frantically saying, Don't come here." Lam Tian Tuat saw this and quickly shouted, "I will back up, everyone, go away." Right in this critical situation, in the air, a beam of light carrying power aimed at the giant beast. The main businessman followed behind with his arms crossed and leisurely appeared. Seeing this scene, both the giant beast and Lam Tian Tuat were confused, not understanding what had just happened. Before he could react, the giant beast let out a scream full of pain, its eyes bulging out. A second later, he was hit in the head by a blast of force. Lam Tian Tuat and other students immediately raised their hands to cover their faces, confused as to what this was all about. In the surrounding high-rise buildings, people rushed out to the balconies, took out their phones to take pictures, they competed to discuss. The sky was shining, the power was so powerful. What kind of super weapon was this? Has the monster been destroyed yet? Below, after defeating the giant beast and waiting for the smoke and dust to clear, the main camp with his hands behind his back stood still and proud. He said contemptuously, but even one blow could not withstand it, the aura that low-level demon beasts contained was too little. When the students of Tianjlam Academy heard this, they secretly said in horror, "How low? It's obviously a super terrifying giant beast, and also, why do they call monsters demon beasts?" But I have to say it again, who is he? Long flowing hair, wearing ancient clothes, killing giant beasts in one blow. Could it be that he is a strong man of a hidden family? Lam Tian Tuat thought with wide eyes. She observed the person in front of her for a moment, then stepped forward and said, "Thank you for saving us." Duan Qin turned his head slightly and replied faintly, "Don't think too much, I hunted and killed this monster, just to get aura." Hearing that, Lam Tian Tuat tried to force a smile, "Ha ha, so that's it." In her mind she was confused and thought, "What is my hobby? Does this person like to play the role of emperor?" The chief didn't want to pay attention to these kids. He raised his hand to create a spiritual and murderous spell. Cultivation was more important, he couldn't waste time with ordinary people. "Close your eyes and search for a moment," the main camp said softly. 30 miles away, there is a large amount of spiritual energy gathering, you must find out the truth." When he finished speaking, he didn't say anything else but jumped straight up and left. Seeing this, Lam Tian Tuat quickly raised her voice and asked, "What is your last name?" The chief stopped for a moment, turned around and said faintly, "The new prince of the chief." Hearing what he said here, Lam Tian Tuat's eyes suddenly opened wide. She stammered, Duan Qin, how is that possible? Didn't Duan Qin die 1,000 years ago?" No one heard these words, and the main camp had now turned into a light, completely disappearing in the vast sky. Main turned into a beam of light, flying straight to a place with a lot of spiritual energy. He leisurely clasped his hands behind his back, walking and assessing, the source of spiritual energy getting closer and closer. The people below were still gathering on the balconies of high-rise buildings. When they saw this scene, they exclaimed in surprise, "Look, there are people flying in the sky. Don't panic if something happens, take a photo and post it online, society first, then consideration." But at this moment, on the big screen of a building, news reporters were reporting, the latest news, the central avenue of the city was attacked by monsters. According to the martial artist nearby, there were a mysterious light descended from the sky, successfully killing the monster. Main hovered in one place, watching all this information. He frowned slightly, secretly calculating in his heart, currently the world is in the early stages of restoring aura, humanity can only cultivate to become being an ordinary martial artist has limited combat power, compared to an immortal cultivator who flies heaven and earth, it is thousands of miles away. Waiting for my cultivation level to be stable, I will bring the next generations of juniors to learn a bit of the way of cultivating immortals. Thinking like that, the Main immediately bowed his body and turned into a stream of light to fly away. He flew at a fairly fast speed, and soon reached his destination. The Main body flew in one fell swoop and landed on the ground. His movements were too fast and strong, causing the surrounding birds to fly away in fright. In front of the Main is a towering tower, sky-high spiritual energy billowing out from inside. This tower is the ancient relic of the Demon Tower, Main thought. It turns out the spiritual energy emanates from this tower. For the side with the sealed chains and blessings is probably a demon suppression stupa. It is indeed a rare item. Not wanting to waste time, Main raised his hand and said faintly, I will accept the aura of this tower. The Main hand opened, immediately absorbing all the aura inside the demon tower, but at the same time, the sealing chains suddenly moved and then broke one after another, and the demonic energy from inside the demon tower also poured out. The main character now only had a base of cultivation level, completely caught off guard, and was immediately hit by the power of that demonic weapon and forced him to retreat a bit. A happy laugh rang out, ha ha ha, this king finally removed the seal. Following this laughter, a giant 9-headed monster gradually appeared through the smoke and dust. This monster was Kuan, A man from the scriptures, skilled in the art of killing slag in the wilderness, killed 9 children on the rampage. Kuon slowly approached the main character, bowed his head, looked at him with emotion. Thanks to your mortal support, this king was very satisfied, and later allowed you boy to become my servant. I, after I annex the world, will not lack good things for you. Main was silent for a moment, evaluating this monster, his eyes as sharp as a knife glanced at it, and said faintly, I didn't expect that there are still great demons in the world who can cultivate to become immortals, allowing you to be my food. What about food? Kuon asked doubtfully, then seemed to understand this sentence. He roared angrily. He didn't like to drink the wine he offered, but he liked to drink the wine as punishment. This king directly ate you. After finishing speaking, 9 brothers opened his mouth full of fangs, intending to take the whole main person in. At this moment, a stream of spiritual energy came from nowhere, blocking the attack of the 9 brothers. He took a step back, looked around and angrily scolded anyone who interfered in other people's affairs and dared to secretly attack this king. The person who just took action was the principal of Tianjlam Academy, Mo Dung Nguyat. She led a group of martial artists, holding the clear sword tightly, speaking in a cold voice, that guy wearing strange clothes, get out of the way, the monster is in charge, it's okay for us martial artists. Kuon saw that he was being treated as such, the demonic energy around his body immediately rushed out. He said angrily, a group of mortals who have brought hardship upon themselves, this deity is the ancient demon king, how could you against? Mo Dung Nguyat didn't bother to pay attention to these threats. She grabbed her sword and rushed forward, raising her voice and shouting loudly, slashing it to death. The sword move carries extremely strong spiritual energy, slashing loudly towards the 9 brothers. This demon beast does not refuse to be weak, it opens 9 mouths to spew out amazing firepower. The 2 sides are constantly fighting, you come, I go, fight until the storm rolls up, the wind and dust are blinding, the sky and earth become gloomy. But in the end, Kuon is still an ancient monster. Martial artists like Mo Dung Nguyat are absolutely not its opponents. They were soon beaten to the ground by Kuon. Main witnessed this scene and shook his head helplessly. Later, martial artists disappointed me too much. The ancient sealed tower was not an ordinary monster, it seemed to be a legendary demon. The martial artists of Tianjlam Academy were beaten by the monster 9 heroes until their clothes were torn and tattered. They were afraid and ran away, leaving only one sentence, Principal, please allow me to run first. Dean Mo Dung Nguyat saw this and shouted angrily, you 2 old scoundrels actually ran away in battle. The monster 9 brothers saw this scene, TSK a few times and then said, risking your life with my 9 brothers, do you have this strength? When Main heard it say that, he raised one hand, spiritual energy flowed from his palm, he waved his hand, not too fast or too slow, he didn't want to make a move. The monster 9 brothers suddenly cried out in surprise. I only saw in front of me a sword that I don't know when appeared. Main held the sword tightly in his hand, a dark voice came out, this sword is called Din Frequency, it can cut all enemies in the world. The monster 9 heroes shrank its neck in horror, it evaluated the sword, thinking, the oppression brought by the sword energy alone made me unable to breathe, where did this powerful weapon come from? Kuon did not want to fall into the wrong position, so he decided to take the first step and kill this strange guy. The Main standing opposite didn't want to waste any more time, he raised his sword to his face, his other hand made a magic spell, softly said, sword technique, soul devouring. Immediately, the sword vibrated loudly, golden spiritual energy poured out from around the sword's body, and immediately after that, thousands of illusory sword energy shot out, with 9 heroes as the center, surrounding it tightly. Kuon saw this scene and cried out in panic, the ancient Dharma has been lost, you are an immortal cultivator. Mo Rong Nguyat stood next to him, watching and sweating, thinking, he wouldn't be a real ancient, would he? I clearly remember that in ancient times, there were only immortals. The ancient monster can't compete with the ancient magic that the new sword shows, it roars and struggles, if this continues, the spiritual energy in Kuon body will be destroyed by the sword, the dry press is gone. Struggling for a long time with Dintan's sword energy, 9 brothers couldn't bear it anymore and screamed in pain, I can't. After this scream, an extremely dazzling column of light flared up. When the light dissipated, the 9 brothers monster was nowhere to be seen, replaced by an extremely beautiful and charming woman. This woman raised her hand with sharp nails to her mouth, petulantly begging, if you guys need spiritual energy, it's better to forgive me directly, I know that many secret places are filled with spiritual energy. The main character was so fascinated by these words of the 9 brothers that he did not stop, but used even more cold force to say that he intended to deceive me. There is no secret place in this world where the living spiritual energy is palpable right before your eyes. It is better to directly practice it. Turn you. Kuan was so scared when he heard that he couldn't hold back his tears and stammered out, "No, no." After being sealed for so many years, it was only now that I saw the 9 brothers' eyes again, not wanting to die just like that, so I used a beauty trick to grab the main leg and sob and beg to express my sincerity and wish to sign with you all. If the master-servant contract is fake, life and death depend on your decision. When Main heard these words, he paused for a moment. In his mind, the image of the 9-headed true body of 9 brothers appeared. He secretly calculated that it would be okay if he was just short of 1 mount to fly to capture 9 brothers, but still, must be careful. Having decided so, the Main immediately held out a finger. From his fingertips, an 8-trigram-shaped matrix suddenly appeared. He said this was a technique to curse the world forever. In the future, if you don't find the secret place, you will be cursed, unleash your divine soul and destroy you. As soon as this sentence ended, countless invisible chains were released to wrap tightly around 9 brothers' entire body. A moment later the spell was established. She let out a breath and sat down on the ground, silently lamenting the danger. Then this time she went big and poked someone who shouldn't be teased. Standing not far away, Mo Dung Nguyet looked at the series of actions of the main character, silently evaluating the self-proclaimed mysterious guy dressed in ancient costumes, summoning a sword formation with his bare hands, easily subduing the Demon King 9 heroes with all kinds of signs, shows that this is a supreme and powerful person beyond the era. Thinking so, Mo Dung Nguyet immediately walked closer and introduced herself as Principal Mo Dung Nguyet of Tianjlam Academy. I don't know how to address you. When Main saw her approaching, he crossed his arms and dodged to the side, hating and saying that his clothes were disheveled. How could he come to see me? When Mo Dung Nguyet heard that, he was puzzled and made a sound, bowing his head to look at the tattered clothes he had just given him. Fight with his 9 brothers. Before he could react, the Main waved his hand and a stream of spiritual energy immediately surrounded Mo Dung Nguyet's body. A moment later, another set of discreet clothes appeared, making Mo Dung Nguyet exclaim in horror and disbelief that the original tattered clothes had been repaired. After finishing everything, Main crossed his arms and calmly said back to the topic, "My name is Main," just because he was looking for spiritual energy, but before he could finish his sentence, the 2 women panicked and shouted the word Main in unison. Kuan immediately shouted, "Isn't the king of the Qin dynasty a descendant of the heavenly emperor who specializes in ramming? It seems that his age is even younger than me." Mo Dung Nguyet next to him suddenly burst into tears. Qin Shi Huang was resurrected. Pausing for a moment, Mo Dung Nguyet regained her lost expression and softly asked the Main senior if she was interested. She could come to Tianjlam Martial Arts Academy to take a tour. In her mind, she silently thought to ignore it. Who has to build a good relationship with the boss? Main feels that this proposal is a good opportunity to learn a little about modern civilization. Therefore, he immediately nodded in agreement and followed your invitation to find out more. When Mo Dung Nguyet received this answer, he shouted with joy, "It was wonderful." At Tianjlam Martial Arts Academy, he saw the principal bringing 2 strangers back. A group of curious students whispered to each other, "Wasn't that Principal Mo Dung?" Who were the 2 people next to her? This type of costume can only be worn by members of a hidden family, right? That horned girl seems to be as a monster. When Mo Dung Nguyet heard these words, he immediately pointed at the main character and introduced him as the senior main character who had just conquered the ancient demon king Kuan, who later became a distinguished guest of our academy. When the students heard this, they immediately exclaimed, "What is the main character of the Qin Shi Huang? Why did he single-handedly subdue the 9 brothers? I'm afraid he's not a living god." Then the main character is an ancient martial. At this moment, Lam Tian Tuyet's group of people also returned to Lam Tian Tuyet Academy. The leader said that we had returned. The giant beast had been beaten to death by a mysterious person. When they came here, the words immediately stopped. Lam Tian Tuyet's eyes widened and she pointed at the person in front of her in horror and said, "Wait a minute, aren't you the one who killed the giant beast, calling himself the main character in one move?" The surrounding students heard this and exclaimed that he still has a move to kill the giant beast. "It's so magical. My brother would like to bow to me, that's great." Having said that, everyone immediately knelt down at his feet, but without any haste, he waved his hand and leisurely said, "Stand up." Even though in the period of my great power, there was no kneeling and bowing ceremony, now it is modern, there's even no need for this kind of annoying ritual. Mo Dung Nguyet, who was next to her, immediately told Lam Tian Tuyet about a certain mission to report that she would introduce the best place to live in the academy for the main senior. First, Lam Tian Tuyet nodded and replied, "Okay." Currently, She is very nervous. Lam Tian Tuat slightly raised her eyes to look at the main character, thinking that facing this kind of powerhouse is very scary. In order not to waste time, Lam Tian Tuat quickly regained her composure and took the main and 9 brothers on a tour of the academy, then took the 2 of them to a splendid villa to politely introduce the main senior. This villa has a total area of 1,000 square meters, is lavishly decorated, and is suitable for living in. It will later be your private residence. Entering inside, Lam Tian Tuat continued to say, "Senior, please come inside and take a look, this is the living room." Main looked around and saw a strange object hanging on the wall and whispered to Kuon, "This is an invention of posterity, generation." The 2 sat down on the sofa and looked at the TV in front of them, which was showing the main news, suspiciously saying that this object could absorb the outside scene. It was probably blessed with the 9 brother magic, and quickly continued to answer, "If the owner liked me, we'll put this item in the bag." Lam Tian Tuat stood next to him and listened to the master and servant of this house. "You say one word, one word." She scratched her head helplessly, thinking that she didn't know anything about modern electrical equipment. As expected, her ancestors had traveled from ancient times, but their knowledge was related. Regarding spiritual practice, the predecessors must have understood a lot. Thinking so, she immediately asked my senior, whose talent had reached a bottleneck and was still stuck at a B-level martial artist, did he know how to break through? Main heard that and simply replied, "Just directly transmit my power into your body." "Enter me, Lam Tian Tuat." "Ask again." No, that's too fast, we've just met, Ku brother is next to me." Hearing this, "I hate it, mutter it, cut it, become a narcissistic pervert." Main didn't care much and immediately waved his hand. The spiritual energy from his hand rolled into Lam Tian Tuyat's body. He said, "Don't think too much, I meant to transmit power into your body to stimulate your spiritual practice." Lam Tian Tuat didn't have time to react as the spiritual energy penetrated her body. She leaned back slightly in excitement, exclaiming that the spiritual energy was so strong that her whole body seemed to have been tempered. But at this moment, the main suddenly frowned as if he discovered something. He was a little surprised to think that it was such a coincidence. From the soul aura to the mysterious ice body, and Lam Tian Tuyat's talent was very similar to Trin Phi's before. "I took her to the palace and heard that Princess Trin was the biological mother of her eldest son Thang Chin Fu Su. Could it be that Lam Tian Tuat is the reincarnation of Trin Phi's main?" Thoughts in the dark. What does this have to do with anything? The main spiritual energy entering Lam Tian Tuyat's body eventually helped awaken her holy body. Lam Tian Tuat couldn't bear it anymore and fainted. Main quickly grabbed her. He looked at the person wrapped in his arms and thought to himself that Trin Phi transformed into a stranger and then met me again. Maybe this is all happening. Regardless of the fate, the Lam Tian Tuat sapling has this mysterious ice holy body that is still worth cultivating. The 9 brothers standing next to him saw this scene and was a bit annoyed and said that the owner was sure that she was pretending to be asleep to intentionally please him. The main turned his head to look at her and shook his head, saying there was no need to be suspicious. She had just woken up. When he woke up from the sacred body, his body couldn't stand it anymore, so he fell into a coma. Hearing that, 9 brother was even more frightened. The owner casually released some spiritual energy that could help her awaken the holy body. This was too unreasonable. She immediately had an idea in her head, so she was as obedient as a puppy and approached Main, putting on a show of favor, saying that Master would also help me collect some spiritual energy and maybe I could awaken a more powerful divine body than Main. Without even thinking about it, I just said no. The 9 brothers were heartbroken and cried loudly. The owner was so unfair. So the night went by and the next day Lam Tian Tuat was still lying on the sofa without waking up. Main sat sideways with his arms crossed in front of the audience watching a movie on TV. The actor in the movie was announcing that His Majesty the Western region had been conquered. After watching this, I stroked my chin in contemplation and later reinterpreted the history of Dai Chin compared to my actual experience that year. There are a few differences, but in general, it still relatively restores the historical truth. Even if it is a beautiful name, it's okay for ancient times and emperors. Or call it a tyrant, it's all in the clouds of the past. And if the flower veins of the past can continue to flourish, that's what I want to see. Thinking about this, 9 brothers came out of the kitchen holding a tray of food and softly said that it was time for breakfast. Main glanced at her and snorted and thought about doing everything to please her, making sure her heart was unjust. Indeed, 9 brother carried out the things and happily thought that the black tea and chicken drumsticks were filled with sleeping pills, waiting for the owner's consciousness to become vague so we could take advantage of the situation. Believe that soon we will be able to cook rice into rice and start a happy life with the owner. Main crossed his arms and looked at the food tray, then leisurely said that I was not interested in mortal food. Kuon heard that and immediately said that this is a delicious dish prepared by me, not mortal food. Main waved his hand and was even less interested in the food cooked by the beast, a sentence that pierced straight into the heart of the young girl of the 9 brothers. She held her heart and cried out in pain. But at this moment, Lam Tian Tuat suddenly rubbed her eyes and woke up, looked at the scene here and immediately jumped up. I panicked and thought it was dangerous. Why did I sleep at the Main senior's house last night like this? It was also very rude. Main heard the movement and turned around to ask if he was awake. Lam Tian Tuat looked at him and screamed in his heart, "Oh my God, Main senior took the initiative to greet me." The 9 brothers standing next to me saw this and got angry and cursed to himself that the owner was so cold to me and took the initiative to greet her. Having just scolded Lam Tian Tuat here, she stood up and politely said that she was truly grateful to Senior Main. "Right now, I feel like my strength has skyrocketed and I have broken through from level B to level A." Main replied that it is normal for you to have awakened the mystical ice holy body and increase your strength. However, if you want to develop the greatest potential of your holy body, it is best to give up learning martial arts and switch to cultivating weapons and cultivating immortals. Cultivating immortals? Lam Tian Tuat raised her eyes and asked, but the method of cultivating immortals had long been lost. Main heard that and immediately said that you can be tested in a few days if you pass the test. I will guide you on the path to cultivating immortality. Lam Tian Tuat's eyes sparkled as she looked at Main with joy and praised Senior Main. It's so good. At this moment, Main thought to himself that after all, Trin Phi reincarnated to give her a few more chances. Lam Tian Tuat happily thought that her path was wider, and being so happy that she could be appreciated by the Main senior was a blessing that she had cultivated in this life. Kuan was very angry at this point. She was so angry that there was a secret story. These two absolutely had a secret story. We can't let this happen like that. 9 brother thought he had to behave properly, so he approached the main character and asked in a soft voice, "Doesn't the master need to practice? According to my memory, I heard that there was a secret recently, obscure spiritual scene." When Main heard that, he was satisfied and nodded. "That's good, let Kuan lead the way." Kuan happily jumped up and replied, "Okay." Outside the academy, Tianj Lam saw the Main coming out and the students started making noise. It was the Main big brother who had come out. As if they had met an idol, they quickly surrounded the Main, their eyes sparkling and glowing, saying to each other, "Senior Main, can you accept me as a disciple? Senior, teach us to cultivate immortality." "Boss, I also want to cultivate immortality." "Main, Marshal, can you sign it for me?" Lam Tian Tuat stood behind and exclaimed, "Wow, great senior, just walked out the door and met so many fans." 9 brother is not happy and scolded the students around you. "What are you looking at? One of my old lady's balls is enough to destroy you." There you are. Waiting for the crowd to calm down, Main clasped his hands behind his back and leisurely said that if he wanted to cultivate immortality, he must have spiritual roots to gain spiritual roots. Why did they all ask in unison? Main nodded and explained that the so-called spiritual roots are actually the individual's talent for practice and the origin of life's aura. In general, people with strong physiques or super spiritual powers and spiritual roots will not be too bad. Hearing that, the students also nodded and exclaimed, "So that's it, senior, help see if I have spiritual roots or not." "Main senior, my spiritual roots are good, take me away." Just at this moment, a contemptuous shout rang out, "You're talking nonsense. Immortal cultivator culture already doesn't exist, you're just a scammer wearing a costume." Following this voice, a group of 3 people came aggressively. Leading the way is a boy carrying a sword on his shoulder, pointing straight at the main character and scolding that martial arts is the best in the world and everything else is trash. A student saw this and said that they were the master of the 9 Brothers Academy and was also ready to tell the main master to let us turn these old men into grilled meat. The main one didn't speak. He glanced at the group of people who had just appeared and thought to himself that from time immemorial until now, there have always been people who have no brains or thoughts of being confused, and today they will use these people in real combat to teach their juniors who enthusiastically love cultivating immortals a course. Thinking so, Main immediately waved his hand and the spiritual energy immediately circulated on his fingertips. He coldly said that if you doubt the way of cultivating immortals, don't hesitate to discuss it so that I can teach you a bit about the martial artist's strength. After the group of newcomers quarreled, after hearing the Main talk, they angrily grabbed swords and arrogantly told him how to be polite. The academy does not allow this kind of fraud to exist. The 3 of them all rushed to attack the Main, not paying any attention to these people. He leisurely stood still, only slightly raising his hand from his fingertips. Powerful spiritual energy began to flow out. Main lightly waved his hand and sent his spiritual energy straight towards the 3 people. They did not expect the person in front of them to be so strong. The 3 people's 6 eyes widened in horror. The Main's movements were too fast. The leader panicked and shouted, "When did you run to the back?" Main turned his head slightly to look at these people, not too quickly or too slowly. and said that this body technique is called the turbulence technique. That was the body technique that I used to avoid assassinations, but I realized how to avoid the enemy's attack and at the same time be able to by counterattacking while absent-mindedly. You were hit by my body concentration technique. After hearing what he said, the others screamed in fear. No, he was too fast, there was no way, absolutely no way. When did he start using his moves? The leader stubbornly wanted to move his body and then exclaimed that this was definitely sorcery. The main didn't bother to pay attention to the guy. He turned his face away and calmly said the correct body concentration technique. Obediently standing in place and trying to move will only cause the tendons and veins in your body to break one by one. As soon as these words finished, the incident happened, only to see this guy startle. His whole body stiffened. Without saying a word, he fell straight to the ground. When two accomplices saw this, they exclaimed in horror, "Oh, I'm dead." The surrounding students witnessed this scene and excitedly cheered. "Senior Main, the strength of the old ancestor is so terrifying. My brother wants to learn to cultivate immortality." Lam Tien Tuat spoke in a voice that could only say that the academy's professor had eyes and could not see the mountain. Next to her, 9 brothers hugged her face and exclaimed that the owner was so handsome. 9 brothers loved her very much. At this moment, Principal Mo Dung Nguyat approached from afar, put her hands on her hips and shouted, "Haven't you told me to be more polite to the senior main characters? You useless trash people are still actively causing trouble." The 2 lucky survivors were still as fierce as before. They trembled and shouted loudly at the dean. It was because we had no eyes that they angered the main senior, hoping that the main senior would not remember the villain. Main didn't intend to be mean to these people. He waved his hand to dispel them, then said that I was just showing off the magic of the Dharma and not to be mean to your juniors. When these 2 guys heard that, they breathed a sigh of relief and immediately knelt down and bowed their heads respectfully, thanking the main senior for his generosity. He could be said to be a saint. The academy's doctor also quickly showed up to pull the leader, has died hard. Waiting for everyone to calm down, he took out a roll of bamboo cards and held them in his hand. He told everyone around him that today, seeing that everyone is very interested in cultivating immortals, I will teach a book of elementary Dharma. Pausing for a moment, he threw the bamboo card roll to Mo Dung Nguyat, then continued to say that this book records the method of cultivating the immortal mind. You can try learning to awaken your spiritual roots. If you have talent, I can consider proceeding one more step in imparting the method of refining energy. The students who heard this happily shouted, "Thank you, senior, we will definitely carefully read." "Thank you, senior, we will not let the main senior be disappointed, we will try to awaken our spiritual roots." But at this time, the 9 brothers saw that the matter here was resolved and immediately bent down and turned around to say to the main, Okay, master, don't waste time with these people, go to the secret place, let's practice, I'm willing to be the master's mount." I took one look at her and said harshly. He stepped forward and hit the 9 brother on the body and scolded the horseman to have the appearance of riding a horse, but he quickly transformed into the 9 brother and cried out in pain, "I know." Then she quickly changed back to her original form so that the main character and Lam Tien Tuat could climb up together. The students standing below quickly waved goodbye to the 3 of them. Mo Dung Nguyat held the bamboo card and turned away, thinking to herself, I have to see in the 2. Let's first introduce what mystery the mind Dharma hides. When I opened it, I looked at the inside of Dung Nguyat's tomb with admiration and exclaimed that it was all Chin Seal's handwriting. This must be researched. 20 miles away in the mysterious jungle, Lam Tien Tuat was fighting monsters, holding her sword firmly in her hand, telling herself that there were only a few remaining monsters. The ice-type swordsmanship continuously followed Lam Tien Tuat's control and attacked the monster. She continued with her line of thought. The main senior once said that immortal cultivators must use magic as the main means of battle. Seeing that it was enough, the main character immediately appeared and reached out to suck the aura of the demon tree. He praised the good work of discovering the spiritual root of the mysterious ice holy body. I am very satisfied with these spiritual aura. Kuan was currently grilling the chicken. She was hungrily urging the grilled chicken to please cook it quickly. When Lam Tien Tuat was praised, she felt embarrassed and thought it would be embarrassing for her senior to praise her. This peaceful scene did not last long, and in the distance a rumbling sound rang out, followed by a cloud of smoke and dust. Waiting for the smoke and dust to clear, a group of people carrying weapons on their shoulders slowly appeared. The leader spoke in such a noisy forest. "It turns out that people from the Tianjlam Academy are playing tricks on you guys. If you don't mind, get out of here, otherwise the Lord Lu Bu will not be polite." The person who just spoke is Tau Iota Nu Eta Alpha Nu Eta of the Lu Bu War Academy. When Lam Tien Tuat heard this name, she excitedly said another Lu Bu. Her worldview was in chaos. Then the main stood with her arms crossed and curiously asked who the hell Lu Bu was. Lam Tian Tuat tried to calm herself down and told the main character that regardless of whether they were real Lu Bu or not, they had to be careful in dealing with their costumes. They were people from the War Academy that had a hostile relationship with Tianjlan, our academy. Lu Bu stood on the opposite side and saw these people still talking so much. He got angry, grabbed his spear and rushed forward. He dared not look at what this boss was doing. You guys would be dead. Main didn't even bother to move. He looked at the person rushing towards him, leisurely reassess another foolish mortal. Lu Bu ran quickly towards Lam Tian Tuat. He jumped up and swung the long spear in his hand, stabbing it straight towards Lam Tian Tuat. Lam Tian Tuat reacted very quickly and immediately raised his sword to block. The two weapons collided and immediately emitted fire. The more Lu Bu fought, the harder he pressed the spear in his hand down and hit Lam Tian Tuat, who flew away for a while. He faintly said, remembering that year when I alone fought with Quan Vu Trong Phai, who was called Phai Tuong, an unknown little prince, what does it count to be as good as you? Because she couldn't bear the weight of the spear, Lam Tian Tuat took a long step back before standing firmly. She held the sword tightly in her hand and frowned, saying that this guy seemed to be a high-level martial artist with such strong talent. Couldn't it be true, being a traveler? Kuan on one side was still roasting chicken. Hearing that, one of her hands raised up, her fingertips bursting with a small stream of demonic energy. She looked at Lam Tian Tuat and sarcastically asked if she could take care of it with white hair and big breasts, or let the old lady come out and give this kid a lesson. Lam Tian Tuat, on the other side, glared angrily and scolded him to shut up. Then the main stood aside to observe and then spoke up. He crossed his arms and seriously said that if you want to become a cultivator, you must forget the difference between martial artist levels and take advantage of spiritual techniques to stop the enemy, especially when dealing with enemies. The enemy holding a heavy weapon in his hand must pay attention to maintaining his body and spiritual energy to avoid frontal confrontation. Lam Tian Tuat heard the main teaching her. She understood as soon as she heard it, then immediately flew towards Lu Bo's direction. She didn't forget to thank the person behind her for understanding and thank her senior for reminding her. Thanks to the main's help, this time under Lu Bu Lam Tian Tuat's attack, he was able to avoid all of this guy's moves, leaving Lu Bu extremely shocked. Lam Tian Tuat dodged Lu Bu's heavy attacks as if she sensed something. As she hit her, she thought clearly that this guy was so confused that it was time to counterattack. At this time, Lu Bu kept fighting and fighting while Lam Tian Tuat kept dodging. This made him extremely angry. He used his spear to stab straight forward and shouted in a cold voice, "The trash of Tianjlan Academy only knows how to avoid. Just dodge. This move is extremely fast and strong." Luckily Lam Tian Tuat dodged it in time. In the distance, Main observed the match between the two of them. He saw that now was the opportunity to counterattack and immediately raised his hand to remind Lam Tian Tuat to seize the opportunity to swing his sword to counterattack. When Lam Tian Tuat heard these words, she immediately jumped into the air and shouted loudly. Tian Tuat understood. As soon as she raised her sword to fight, Lu Bu immediately felt that something was wrong. The move that Lam Tian Tuat unleashed caught Lu Bu off guard. He was so scared that he couldn't even open his mouth to say a complete sentence. Lu Bu's whole body gradually froze, making him unable to move anymore. The man clenched his teeth and exclaimed, "What kind of magic is this?" Lu Bu warily looked at the main who was idly standing to the side with his arms crossed and immediately seemed to realize something. Lu Bu put all his strength into breaking the ice layer on his body, looked at the main with a glare, then swung the spear in his hand towards the main and said in a cold voice that it was because of this guy in black who was secretly harassing him. Seeing that Lu Bu was not afraid of death like that, Lam Tian Tuat was stunned and said that attacking a senior would be no different from finding a way to die yourself. The nine brother who witnessed the main's terrible power was full of sympathy, and that's right, is a reckless youth who does not know the height of the sky and the breadth of the earth. At the same time, Lu Bu's spear, carrying his spiritual energy, stabbed straight towards the main. Main raised his hand neither quickly nor slowly. He used two fingers to grasp the tip of the spear without wasting any effort. This scene made Lu Bu extremely shocked. The look on his face when he saw this scene was extremely unique. He gasped as if he couldn't believe his eyes. He secretly thought that in the blink of an eye, he had suppressed his attack and the aura emitted made it difficult for others to move. Nudge. When Main saw Lu Bu's reaction, he used his fingertips to hold the spear out. He coldly said that his qualifications were good, but he didn't have the strength. Seeing that you were a junior with excellent talent, he could spare you from death. This attack from the main sent Lu Bu flying far away. He fell to the ground in pain and let out a howl. Lu Bu's whole body was covered in wounds. He sat under a rock with a deep hole in it, his eyes filled with anger mixed with suspicion. He secretly thought to himself, what kind of god is this person? This is not a martial art technique at all, fake. At this moment, two of Lu Bu's subordinates hurriedly ran to the leader. holding a phone that was playing a scary video saying that we had offended the boss. Then another guy waved his arms and legs, signaling to say boss. I remember he was the main character on TV as mentioned. After hearing the two juniors talk about the main character's reputation, Lu Bu was startled. He angrily used his foot to kick the two juniors away and then scolded and insulted him. Why didn't you guys say something sooner? Realizing that he had done something wrong, Lu Bu immediately knelt down on one knee and confessed his crime because Lu Bu is a great martial general, and his soul was reincarnated into this junior. Today, I took the liberty of offending your majesty, life and death, although your majesty will handle it. Main stood facing Lu Bu for a moment and then asked what dynasty Lu Bu was from. Who are you? He asked these two questions. Main was skeptical, thinking that the general of the Qin dynasty would not meet him, but instead bumped into a martial general of unknown origin. Listening to the Main asking for his information, Lu Bu scratched his face and faltered, saying that this story is quite special. After all, it is the dynasty after the fall of the Qin dynasty, and I Lu Bu is just a small figure compared to his majesty. You say it doesn't count as anything. Main didn't take to heart what Lu Bu had just said. He clasped his hands behind his back and slowly felt that over 2,000 years it was inevitable that a change in dynasties would be a normal thing. If you are the reincarnated martial general of the Hua Ha clan, I am sure, a big-hearted person doesn't care about internal battles. After hearing the Main's words, Lu Bu's heart immediately panicked and he couldn't think of anything. Lu Bu immediately clasped his hands together. He respectfully looked at the Main and said that His Majesty's ancestors were very correct. My father's fate to meet him today is not as good as the Emperor's acceptance of me as his adopted son. Lu Bu knows how to repay kindness even if he has to be a dog or a horse. After Lu Bu finished speaking, Main looked at him with a puzzled expression. He quickly turned around and walked away, bluntly replying that I rule the world and treat all living beings equally. How could I accept you as my adopted son for personal reasons? What sentence? Main didn't turn around and continued to speak, but the opportunity still has to be there. In the future, I will unify the universities to form a power to cultivate immortals. The two of Lam Tien Tuat and Kuon have only been standing there watching the show until now. Hearing the Main's words, they were shocked and shouted in unison to form a force. Main turned his head to look at the two of them. He nodded and said that at that time, each of them was my disciple without any feelings about all living beings being equal in practice. After listening to the Main's great plan, Lu Bu knelt down, not knowing what to do, and cried bitterly. He said it was all because of Lu Bu's limitations, so I understand that the first emperor's goal was so great. On the other side, Lam Tien Tuat blushed and praised the Main senior for his power. Kuon also happily said that this is my master, waiting for our power to grow stronger. We will try to defeat the entire world. Lu Bu was still sitting there, crying and gritting his teeth, saying that Lu Bu, in my past life, wandered around and never accomplished anything, just a brat. Having said this, he stopped for a moment, bowed his head in front of the Main character, then continued urgently, now that he has met his gentle master, I am willing to follow his orders. Hearing these words, a fleeting smile appeared on the Main's mouth. He turned back to look at Lu Bu, and his words softened a bit. If you have the heart to come with me, practice diligently so that I can see your glory. Lu Bu felt like he was being grateful. He clasped his hands on his head and respectfully shouted, Thank you, Your Majesty. Lam Tien Tuat stood outside and witnessed this scene. She placed her hand on her chest and secretly believed that under the guidance of the Main senior, the culture of cultivating immortals will spread throughout the world. Hoa Han Yet Mok will certainly also do so, stronger, achieving splendor never before achieved. 3 days later, under the control of the Main Tianj Lam Academy and the War Academy, they merged to become allies, cultivating immortals and using martial arts to enter the Tao. The culture of cultivating immortals naturally became a movement. Lam Tien Tuat was appointed by the Main body as the leader of the disciples to lead the students to open the path of practice. From then on, the cultivating force led by the Main leader was completely established and was called Qin Min. At the same time, the Martial Artist Association began to pay attention to the development trend of the Qin Alliance and held important conferences. At the headquarters of the White Magic Martial Artist Association, the association president is discussing with everyone about the game. Based on the latest intelligence, Qin Ming is just propagandizing the culture of cultivating immortals to harmonize the major martial arts academies with each other does not pose any great threat to the city. He seriously asked everyone's opinion on this matter. Do you have any opinions? Hearing Bok Tuat's question, everyone started to give their opinions. I intended to attract Main into the association. The result of yesterday's invitation was rejected outside the door. I proposed to kill Qin Min and then hunted Main to arrest him. Laboratory doing cloning surgery. Hearing these words, Bok Tuk frowned, clasped his hands together, thought for a moment, then said that these are not good strategies. I suggested that he implicitly allow his wise forces to exist to support and cooperate. Seeing the white magic openly supporting the main character, the people sitting below began to stir. A guy wearing a gag spoke up to stop this. This is not very good. The woman next to him also agreed with the opinion of the Chin Min guy who proposed cultivating immortals. If we disagree with the Martial Artist Association, we're afraid we won't cooperate. If we cooperate with cultivators, are we still worthy of being called martial artists? Bok Tuat could not stand them talking too much, so he slammed his hand on the table with a loud bang. The white magician pushed the chair up and looked back at the scene when the main fought the demon beast on the virtual screen. He slowly said that the video documenting the main's fight, everyone hasn't seen it yet, and asked those of you sitting here who can compete with you, surname. At the same time, a panicked security guard ran into the emergency room to report that there were many monsters landing on the coast causing trouble in our Dongchao city. The chairman of the White Magic Martial Artist Association heard such an urgent report, and he seriously shouted to everyone to obey and order martial artists to attack to prevent the monsters from invading. Everyone in the meeting room responded in unison. In Dongchao City, there are many monsters flying in the air. At the same time, the news is also broadcasting live many monsters landing from the east coast. Please pay attention to safety and do not go out. As soon as he finished speaking, the hairy wild boar monster gurgled several times and was sent flying, causing the entire building to crumble. Below, Lu Bu was holding his spear, launching his newly learned moves happily, saying ha ha ha. After learning the weapon training technique of the main senior, the moves were flexible and naturally. The surrounding people were also affected. Lu Bu's move affected the whole person and they flew up high. They quickly hugged each other in fear and shouted loudly, "Senior Lu Bu, be gentle." There were countless monsters. They were opening their mouths to grab the living and swallowing them up. Everyone was scared and ran hand in hand. A weak girl unfortunately tripped and fell. The monster quickly walked towards the girl. If I still had the strength to stand up, I could only cover my face with my hands and cry. At this moment, several extremely powerful spiritual energy appeared and stabbed straight at the monsters, causing them to scream in pain. Lam Tian Tuat took the lead and raised her voice to say that all the bad guys will be brought to justice. Everyone please evacuate from here. People around saw that they had been saved and happily said that they were finally saved. There was a girl who recognized them as whoever immediately spoke up was a member of the Chin Min. Lam Tian Tuat did not stay here for long. She led 2 other people to run to find the monster and told them to continue to other streets to chase and kill them. At this moment, high in the sky, a ball of spiritual energy was gathering in one place. Main stood on the back of the 9 brothers. His whole body was absorbing that abundant spiritual energy. He was pleased to say that everyone gathered would to light a fire with the help of the gods to absorb the spiritual energy more effectively. Kuan glanced at the main figure standing on his back and softly said that the master is quite intelligent, worthy of being an ancient emperor with Qin Ming's disciples to support him, and in the future, he won't have to worry about losing his spiritual power anymore. As soon as Kuan finished speaking, he punched the monster and flew to the head of the magical beast. Among them, there was a stray man who could fly. Legend of the Island Nation also recorded several long heads flying towards the main character. He squinted his eyes, thinking that there were still ghosts in the world. Main was about to withdraw his hand so he could deal with the devil when a red figure quickly passed by and said to leave it to me. The level of martial artist company Ba waved his hand and shouted at those little monsters with confidence. Heroes always appear at the most important moments and I am the hero. After speaking, he laughed a few times. The soldier standing opposite the main character calmly said that he was stunned by my manipulations. Can't martial arts be cultivated? Main didn't pay much attention to his words and 9 brothers at the same time shouted to be careful behind the Koba soldier, not knowing that behind him appeared a huge monster head that was about to open up and swallow. The guy gasped incomprehensibly. The monster looked at the soldier for a moment and then decisively grabbed his whole body into his mouth. The main character looked at this scene and sarcastically said, "Hey hero, please go one step ahead." After saying that, he lifted himself up from the 9 brother and looked around and said, "It seems I still have to do it myself." Main used his hands to summon the wolf family stone. The Lang Jia stone suddenly appeared in front of the little monsters. They immediately shrank their necks in fear. The main character coldly used the wolf family stone to point his finger at the monsters and said that this was the wolf family stone with the engraved power of the great Qin's ability to suppress demons in the world. Lang Jia Thatch followed his master's orders and pressed all the monsters to the ground to protect them. Immediately afterwards, there was a loud explosion and blinding light shot straight into the sky with dust and dirt. In the distance, people heard such a loud explosion and wondered who threw the nuclear weapon. Some people exclaimed and said the force was so strong that even the ground was shaken. Lu Bu proudly pointed towards the sound. The explosion and light emitted smiled and said that it was definitely His Majesty's first move. On the rooftop of a high-rise building, there was a general standing proudly, his cape fluttering in the wind. The general looked towards the distant explosion with a bright smile, firmly affirming in his heart that only His Majesty can do such a powerful thing. The general named Meng Diem happily thought that he had finally found him after overcoming the interface of the gods. Main used the wolf family stone to make the little monsters lie flat in the hole caused by the previous explosion. The messenger was at the live recording scene saying that this morning many monsters from the outside world came from Donghai raided the city. The main suspect is that the king of ancient times reincarnated and presented himself to lead Qin Ming's disciples to successfully fight and prevent monsters from invading. Even though the cameraman was taking pictures, the main character was still busy absorbing the aura from the demons. While absorbing him, he thought that there was more aura hidden in the demons than I thought. At this time, the driver was driving the car and he shouted to the people standing in the way. When the MC saw it, he immediately told the audience that there was a motorcyclist rushing into the scene. Lu Dad wanted to brake the car but he couldn't. He drove straight towards the cameraman and said, "Damn, my chain brake is broken." It took him a long time to stop the car, but Lu Bu quickly knelt down in front of the main character and respectfully told His Majesty that all the monsters in the city had been killed. Main slowly lowered himself to the ground. He praised Lu Bu. "Very good, remember your military merit." Once Lu Bu looked up at Main happily and said, "Oh, thank you, Your Majesty." Lu Bu salivated thinking that it would be a great honor for him to be approved by His Majesty's new emperor. He believed that he would soon be promoted to rank and become an effective favorite general. He thought about the time when he would be promoted to general. Quan and Main reached out and touched his head. Thinking of this, Lu Bu laughed happily. Right now a giant flame was falling from the sky. This made Lu Bu and Main frowned in alarm. Lu Bu looked at that huge fire and said that the enemy has been attacking with aura recently. "Your Majesty, be careful." As he finished speaking, a figure wearing a cloak appeared on the ground. General Meng Omen respectfully clasped his hands and said, "Your Majesty." Meng Diem immediately knelt down and said the end of the story. After overcoming many obstacles, he finally found Mr. Main, looking at the general kneeling in front of him. The two words Meng Diem immediately appeared in his mind. Main quickly walked over to help Dream Omen and got up a little excitedly saying he couldn't believe that General Dream Omen had also come to the human world. Quickly calm down and don't need to perform a grand ceremony. Lu Bu stood looking at the two of them and his eyes widened in shock. Lu Bu's tears streamed down as he looked at the main supporter. The Dream of Omens woke up. His heart ached as he thought that he could become a Qin Huang and love General. "Where did the Dream Omen come from, General? I'm afraid I don't have a chance." The main side here worriedly asked the Dream Omen a few things after I failed to cross over. "What is the situation in the fairy world?" The dream vaguely said it was a long story. Since His Majesty's defeat, the heavenly demons from the outside realm have continuously invaded. Great Qin, the earth god, has led the generals to fight against the chaos of constant war in the fairy world. It's a pity that the heavenly demons' army is too strong, followed by the approaching army. Conquering more than 10 pieces of immortal land, the alien clans that had been submissive to the Great Qin also rebelled and joined the heavenly demon faction. Meng Omen angrily said that Your Majesty was not in the fairy world like a group of dragons with no hands. I and the generals thought for a while and guessed that Your Majesty at that time failed to escape the tribulation and escaped into the vortex of space. Of course he would go to the human world. Meng Omen stopped for a moment to see the main's attitude. Then he clasped his hands and bowed his head to continue speaking. Under the recommendation of the generals, I have traveled through the human world to search for Your Majesty's whereabouts. I will meet you here today. I hope Your Majesty return to the fairy world and join the generals to attack the demons. After listening to the Dream Omen's wishes, Main showed off his current cultivation level and calmly said that my current cultivation level is still not enough to return to the fairy world and still needs some time to practice. I returned my cultivation to the main game and spoke my thoughts. Fortunately I established the Quinming faction and had countless disciples to help me collect spiritual energy that could increase the speed of my cultivation. Hearing that, Meng Diem quickly knelt down and said that he wished to assist His Majesty. He did not refuse Lu Bu, nor would he be inferior. He also knelt down and respectfully shouted for me to follow General Meng Diem and take on the position of General Tan Min. Only then did the white magician and his people come to the place where he spoke and said that all the masters were here. Seeing the white magic gently land on the ground, I secretly thought that martial artists who can fly with air, it seems that the strength of these people is not low. Bok Tuat was very conscious, and when he and the people in the guild landed, they immediately clasped their hands to express their sincerity and said that Bok Tuat is the president of the Martial Artist Association and is here to invite Lord Tan Huang to cooperate for the future of Tan Min. advising everyone. Before he could finish his sentence, Lu Bu picked up the bottle and a layer of spiritual energy emerged from his body. He angrily said, "Shut up, Your Majesty, how can I cooperate with you mortals?" The dream omen in his hand also summoned the Dragon King, who emitted a layer of murderous aura and said in a cold voice that if someone comes uninvited, Your Majesty, you'd better be careful. One of the white magic team couldn't stand it anymore, so he rushed towards the main and scolded the Martial Artist Association for inviting them to keep an eye on you. The white magic standing behind didn't expect that guy's stupid action and immediately shouted when he saw that, "Don't act without thinking." Mung Omen quickly used his hands and eyes to block the main person. He looked at the man who had just approached. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. He gritted his teeth and said, "In front of Your Majesty, how could you let your dog bark wildly?" Having finished speaking, without giving the other person time to react, he used Trung Vuong Long to attack the other guy, causing him to cry out in pain. Seeing the terrifying power of the dream, the white magic people froze on the spot. They were stunned and thought that just a general had killed 2 level A martial artists in one move. The main strength would definitely be stronger than the level of terror. How can I be so foolish as to invite Tan Min to cooperate? I really don't know my own strength. Dream omen of Mid-Autumn Festival, King Long returned and calmly said that even though his cultivation had been seriously damaged by the law of the plane, he was still more than capable of dealing with these idiots. Lu Bu stood next to him, his eyes sparkling with admiration. Look at the dream omen and say that the dream omen is a powerful predecessor. Seeing the strength of the person next to him, Main Bok Tuat quickly knelt down and subdued his juniors who had eyes that did not know the mountain. I hope that Lord Tan Huang will forgive the cowardly sinner and be willing to offer important information about the mysterious realm. Hearing this name, the main character immediately asked Bong Kao Mysterious Scene if it was Penglai Tian's son. Bok Thao did not dare to hide it and nodded and replied that it was precisely yesterday that the mysterious realm appeared from the sea, and the eastern Barak Island country sent people to invade and occupy this place, which belongs to our territory. Besides that, they also chased all the monsters from the island into our flower land, leading to major cities being attacked. It can be said that the heart of our people is very clear. When Main heard this, he nodded and it was like that. He thought that the Camp Island was once a desolate place, but now he dares to be so arrogant. It must be from the good fortune that he went to the camp that year to support his bloodline and power. I thought for a while and looked at everyone around me loudly shouting that the alien race was raging indiscriminately in the world. The world was in chaos. I needed to personally go out and take back the mysterious realm and wipe out the Camp Island. Seeing the Main leave, the group of white thugs immediately bowed to the mighty Tan Huang. If a strong man like you comes out to attack, the possibility of reclaiming the province can be said to be certain. Main didn't pay attention to them anymore. He ordered General Meng Kuan to listen to the order, and tomorrow he will take Lam Tien to it and me to the secret area of Penglai to chase away the enemy at Oa Dao Camp. Dream of the Omens clasped his hands and replied that he was commanded to obey His Majesty's orders. Kuan next to him made a proposal and told him that if he brought me with him, he would be able to go to Lam Tien to it, so let's go. Lu Bu used his starry eyes to look expectantly at the Main. His Majesty, the last general also wanted to go out to kill those barbarians. The Main nodded and said that I have made arrangements. After that, he loudly told Lu Bu to lead his followers to guard the coast and not let the monster beasts from the island go to the east coast and threaten the lives of the people. Lu Bu heard this and immediately shouted seriously to obey the order. His heart was dancing happily, thinking that this was the Emperor's favor in entrusting me with an important responsibility. Lu Bu stood straight and assured the Main that His Majesty could rest assured that with Lu Bu here, I would definitely not let those monsters go ashore even half a step. Bok Tuat stood to the side and observed them, secretly thinking in his heart that how often he would kill and punish, under his protection, Hua Ha would definitely be able to take back the island of Bong Q Dai Thang Camp. A day later, people were busy coming to the beach. Lam Tien Tuat stroked her hair, looked around and said there were a lot of people coming to say goodbye. The people along the coast were very enthusiastic. Ku brother, as if there was nothing to say. Why is such an atmosphere worthy, with his master's royal status? When the people around saw the Main coming out, they immediately gathered around and some people made a gesture saying Hua Ha is so big, how can there be such a place that even if people trample on Qin Huang, he will definitely return to Hua Ha's trespasser. Even if we are far away, we still have to kill. Please, Your Majesty, please quench the morale of the people. Looking at the people surrounding me, my heart is moved and I think, unexpectedly, all the people came to say goodbye to my husband. Next to me, he extended his arms to protect himself with his face. Seriously, there was an excited girl who shouted, Main Senior, I love you, can you sign my name? Escaped from the crowded crowd, Main went to the place of Bok Tuk. Bok Tuk immediately introduced the person next to Lord Tan Huang. I and the engineer have prepared the boat for you to go to sea. Then the engineer next to me quickly spoke up and said, Hello Lord Chin Huang, I am a mountaineer. Ah Go's son happily pointed at the huge ship in the distance and happily said that this was a warship built by the research department of the Martial Artist Association, which could ensure the safety of the adults at sea. Main took one look at that warship and then turned away and criticized that such a large iron and steel thing would definitely move slowly, not knowing when it would reach the secret realm. After finishing speaking, the Main raised his hand to summon the Vu Vuong Chao ship. He was neither quick nor slow, but said he should still go with mine. The huge dragon-headed wooden boat immediately appeared before everyone's eyes and opened its mouth to scream loudly. People around looked at the dragon boat slowly falling into the sea and whispered that the dragon boat fell from the sky and had magic to summon objects in mid-air. The main character did not wait for the dragon boat to fall. He jumped on the boat himself and then said that this was Vu Vuong Chao, a fairy pearl used in the Vu dynasty era. Water moves as fast as a dragon and can travel thousands of miles. The white magician gaped at the ship and said that Vu Vuong is not something for myths and legends, so why did the engineer look excitedly and reply that this matter cannot be explained by science? Waiting for the dragon boat to fall, the main group shouted departure and started walking. People stood on the shore watching the boat leave, waving and saying goodbye. We waited for His Majesty to return. Dreaming about standing on the ship's cabin and teaching students how to strike spears, they must have a strong right foot to be able to kill the enemy in one move, the group of students repeatedly replied clearly without argument. When the boat stabilized the main direction, he looked at his eyes and sat meditating. His entire body exuded a thick stream of spiritual energy. He secretly thought that the spiritual energy was gradually stabilizing. Combined with practice, he would be able to enter the Golden Dan stage. Kuan is wearing a cool outfit and carrying a swimming float. She hovers in front of the main character and gently says that practicing is boring and dry, or should the master and the lovebirds play in the water with the slaves? Lam Tien Tuat quickly came to stop Kuan. Kuan, now is the crucial time to take back the Cotton Stitch Senior, who is calmly meditating. Don't make trouble. Hearing that, this 9-brother girl turned around and glared angrily at Lam Tien Tuat for a while, then rushed into an argument. What did she scold about? That's called causing trouble. You basically don't understand anything about love. No wonder you're still single. Lam Tien Tuat himself also refused to give up, so he said that it is better than you all day misleading your seniors and causing chaos in the hearts of the army. At the same time, the main didn't know when he woke up. He flew over to look at the two people and coldly said to stop making noise. The sea area has recently been fluctuating in spiritual power. Main glanced coldly at the distant sea and continued to say that there were definitely shrimps coming. Just as he finished speaking, the shadow of a sea monster appeared not far ahead. The sea monster bared his teeth and looked at the boat approaching him, thinking to himself that if the prey has come to the door, please come and let me gnaw your teeth. Meng Omen jumped up and fought towards the sea monster, shouting at the small fish that dared to come close to His Majesty's dragon pearl. The sea monster was so angry that it raised its voice in response to the small mortal who still dared to slap you in the face of the devil. In the history of Qin Shi Huang, it was written that Chi Fu met a giant fish and shot dead a main fish. Looking at the giant fish in front of him, he remembered that record and thought for a while. I still remember the time when I patrolled the east of Chi Fu. That year, he used a bow and crossbow without holes to kill a large fish that seemed to be from the Ma Giao tribe. Hearing that, the other demon looked at the main character and said incredulously, that black-clothed boy of yours is very familiar. It's like I've seen him somewhere. Then he turned left and right for a while and said, wait, let me see the old man's teachings, cardboard. After saying that, the ghost summoned the instructions and opened it, only to see the main page standing on the first page with a red warning image. Ma Giao's eyes widened. He looked up at the main character and then looked at Di Huan, thinking with sadness and worry, it turned out to be a natural enemy. That year, the old ancestor was shot dead by him. His teaching said that this person has a magic crossbow in his hand. If you encounter this person in the next generation, you must avoid it. I really have no eyes when I encounter a big nail. The protocol ghost looked at the main character and then bowed his head with tears pouring down like rain. The little fish with eyes didn't know that Tai Sun was just passing through the street. If there was any offense, I hope you will forgive me. Main immediately raised his hand with abundant spiritual energy, threatening it to hinder Chin Min's boat. How can I let this go? The little ghost saw that and was extremely scared. He quickly bowed down and begged the ghost, the clan that only has me left will kill me and my clan will be extinct. At this time, in the cabin, Kuan excitedly said that the master asked the slave to make it into grilled fish for everyone to eat. Lam Tien Tuat is simpler than grilling it. It's better to boil such a large ma jiao that it can be eaten for a long time. Mung Omen also stroked his chin and said that going to the sea with His Majesty could still be blessed with food. The students also eagerly shouted that if they follow His Majesty, they will have meat to eat. Looking at the 5 people who wanted to roast and boil themselves to make food, the ghosts really trembled. He cried weakly and looked extremely pitiful. He pretended to be innocent and asked if you guys wanted to go to the secret place to get married. I know a shortcut that can take everyone there. Hearing about Penglai Tian's son, the main's face sank and he thought he had to exhaust all the values that could be used to let this ghost lead the way, and then it wouldn't be too late to eat it. Then the main glanced at Ma Giao, nodded and said it was just a little food. Today, I'll let you off the hook. I order you to lead the boat to the secret place. Holding Ma Giao as a favor, he repeatedly nodded and was moved. Don't forget to thank the Lord for His grace. After a stick of incense, a chain was tied around its neck to pull the dragon boat. It happily enjoyed the life that was almost lost, and happily said that the secret of the world had been completely sealed off by the people. They also sent a very strong Onmyoji to cast a barrier spell so that any monster that wanted to get close would be prevented from entering. Main stood with his arms crossed on top of the dragon's head and said calmly that he could stop monsters but he couldn't stop living people. Very quickly, the demon brought the boat to the secret area of the village. It quickly shouted to everyone, "Look, the barrier is ahead." The main heard the demon talk and jumped forward for a while. He looked far away for a moment and then said that the barrier alone could break it in the blink of an eye. Main once again summoned the wolf family and brought him closer to the barrier. Lang Jia Trot made a booming sound and easily broke the barrier of the secret realm. At this time, 2 people appeared in the secret space, one black and one white. They were Onmyoji. The white-clothed man waved the fan in his hand and said faintly, "Whoever dared to enter the secret place." The other person seemed a bit impatient. He immediately took a step forward and raised his voice, "Don't say too much to them. The barracks emperor has orders for anyone who arbitrarily enters the territory to be killed without mercy." Main stood on the back of the 9 brothers and ordered everyone to listen to the order to destroy all alien races. As soon as he finished speaking, the dreamers obeyed the order and immediately rushed forward. The Onmyoji master also refused to be weak and raised his hand to use the yin-yang technique of the divine wind to cut off the 2 of them, at the same time shouting the divine wind to help the camp defend the island. Meng Yuem took a step forward and swung the Trung Vuong dragon up, creating a billowing stream of spiritual energy that blocked the power of the divine wind. His voice was cold. "How could my martial general be stopped by the whirlwind?" The spiritual energy that the dream summoned gradually gathered into the shape of a giant lion, which opened its mouth full of sharp teeth and roared. Onmyoji didn't even bother to look at him, immediately rushed closer to Meng Diem, waved his hand and said that Chinese people have some skills, but compared to the attack power of our Onmyomists, they are still stronger. Kuan transformed into his real body and flew high in the air, opened his mouth, breathed fire and hit down, saying come here quickly. Anyway, Lam Tien Tuat is free, raised his sword and struck out a move. Calm down, everyone. Onmyoji looked at this scene and exclaimed in horror, "Is this a mixed element attack?" They turned around and ran away in disarray, opening their mouths to shout ice and fire, twin heavy sky. In the legend, why do twin heavy air strikes? Hoa Ha's tactics are so expert. They switched targets and simultaneously attacked the main Onmyoji, waving a giant pen in his hand and contemptuously saying that this handsome guy must be the enemy's boss. For the glory of the island nation, I bet on hundreds of years of my life's experience as a painter. Vowing to draw an invincible scene, the giant pen in his hand quickly waved around the main scene. Main didn't bother to pay attention and crossed his arms indifferently and said he wanted to see what you could draw. A moment later, this Onmyoji stopped writing and shouted for the Great Spirit to open. A monster that looked like a giant ape suddenly appeared, opened its mouth and roared loudly, then rushed towards the main character. He still stood still and said coldly, "What is your painting that makes no sense?" After finishing speaking, Main raised his hand and released powerful spiritual energy from his palm to surround the great god. That spiritual energy gradually turned into giant chains that bound the great god's entire body, making it unable to breathe. Looking at this scene, the Onmyo master was so surprised that his eyes widened and he exclaimed in a confused way, "What is this thing that humans can do with one hand? It's so illogical." The people in the camp fell down in surprise. "My painting has faded and my 3-door view has disappeared. That is the hand of God." Looking at the expression of Onmyoji, Main waved his hand and said indifferently that it was just a fake god's disaster and was not worthy of fighting with me. The Onmyoji was betrayed and spat out a mouthful of blood. He was terrified and thought to himself that the defeated spirit had betrayed me. At this moment, the main character raised the frequency sword in his hand and shouted loudly, "Today, I will let you learn a little about what is called true summoning." When the students of the academy heard that, they excitedly shouted, His Majesty the Emperor took action, and then the Onmyoji masters also stopped and asked each other in doubt, did Huaxia also have a spirit? On the other side, the main person raised his hand and created a spell to begin summoning the 12 golden men. He said that after unifying the 6 countries, he confiscated the weapons of the world, and refined them to create 12 golden men, placing them in the royal palace of Hamduang Su Ky Tan. The emperor's version records that in the 26th year of Qin Huang, he recruited soldiers from all over the world to gather in Hamduang with the purpose of becoming terracotta soldiers. Thousands of soldiers were placed in the royal court. The 12 immortal golden men will forever protect the flowers from the alien races outside that will treat you like trash. Just a good monk is enough. As he finished speaking, 42 golden men appeared around them, with sparkling golden light on their bodies. They were all wearing neat armor and holding their own weapons. The 42 golden men consisted of 2 crossbowmen and 2 infantrymen respectively. Seeing this scene, the Onmyoji immediately turned around and ran away, not forgetting to shout, "Are you kidding? I'll run away first. You and I will fight again in the future to keep the Green Mountain without worrying about having no firewood." But the main character let him escape so easily. He ordered the soldiers to chase after the 42 golden men, who immediately answered clearly and flew after the Onmyo master. The speed of the 4 soldiers was extremely fast, and soon they were about to catch up with the Onmyo master. The man screamed in panic, asking why soldiers were so strong. Before he could finish his sentence, a powerful force hit this Onmyo master, knocking him straight to the ground. When people below saw this scene, they panicked and exclaimed, "Is this my brother who died in battle?" Above, the 2 crossbowmen of the 12 golden men continuously shot arrows down below. This Onmyo master angrily waved his hands and shouted for my divine wind to destroy your arrows. But no man's divine wind could compete with the arrows of the 12 golden men. The arrow tore through the wind and penetrated straight through the body of the Onmyo master. Before he died, he only had time to exclaim how powerful Hoaha's arrow skills could be. It's so big that even the wind shield can be directly broken. Mung Diem can rushed up at the right moment and said contemptuously, "Ha, the crossbow is the great Qin's treasure that even 1,000 soldiers can defeat, let alone your wizard." After dealing with this Onmyoji master, Lam Tien Tuat and the 9 brothers also came down to gather with everyone. Lam Tien Tuat said that the remaining trash bottles had all been slaughtered. Our first battle was victorious this time. The 9 brothers by his side continue to say that, thanks to the master's support, he was able to win so easily. Main raised his head slightly and slowly said that the general situation has been decided. It's time for me to use the power of the immortal emperor to take over this secret realm, right? As he finished speaking, he flew high into the air with his hands creating a spell and mumbled something. Countless bands of colorful light gathered from all 4 directions and called me, Big New Fairy Vein, to bring me to the beach. Secret scene. Main's 2 hands clasped together between the palms. A small ball of spiritual energy gradually formed. He silently said that the Dan Deen stabilizes the spiritual energy and condenses the structure. The stage of success is complete. If there is a further breakthrough, perhaps it can be finished. Out knitting needles. Below, everyone raised their eyes to look up at Lam Tien Tuat and asked the main senior Muong Omen about to be promoted. Why did Mung Omen nod and say, "Yes, Your Majesty, this is a sign of a breakthrough"? The 5 elements of elemental energy converge and condense the true energy to form a golden pill. Main secretly thought that although his aura was unstable, his cultivation level had broken through to the Golden Dan stage. He was extremely satisfied and immediately sat down to look at everyone and said that I made a pill and the result is truly a good omen. I will let the holy rain come and share it for all of you to enjoy. Hearing that, everyone immediately shouted excitedly, "Long live the royal corn!" Offshore on the Alliance fleet of the Joint Islands and the 5 nations. A person wearing a white robe looked at the vast ocean and silently lamented that he was finally late again. The person who showed it was the fleet captain Gaku Zibasaki. He was wearing huge sunglasses on his face and had a cigar in his mouth, his arms crossed, and he said in a cold voice that it was time to carry out justice and add some color to the summer flowers. At sea, 3 or 4 warships from the Alliance of the Islands and the 5 nations were preparing to land on the mainland. Gaku Zibasaki raised his hand and said his fire ability. As soon as he said this, his hand immediately burst into a bright flame. The people behind saw this scene and exclaimed in surprise. It was the first time they had witnessed an ability with such strong firepower. The feeling of pressure was so strong. Oka, the general's bravery is so powerful. My navy is invincible. Gaku Zibasaki flew up and loudly ordered the combined fleet to obey the order for all troops to go ashore and kill. Looking at those people flying down to the mainland, the human being with the ability to soften said contemptuously, "Who is this Asao Okamoto, the self-righteous hound mongrel of the island and the western country?" Standing next to Pat 2, the person with gravity abilities said indifferently, who said he was the boss of the combined fleet. Having just said this, another person also ran up and said okay, we should go. This person is Kuruzu, the person with tentacle powers. He clasped his hands behind his back, not paying any attention, and said anyway, the fleet, the confederation, is also an alliance formed by the sea areas of 6 countries together. We absolutely must not let Asa steal the first victory. In the distance, on the main side, they also heard the enemy's shouts of fight and kill. Lam Tien Tuat frowned and told everyone to be careful of an enemy attack. As soon as the words ended, the enemy approached the place. They held weapons in their hands and ran while shouting that the Navy would definitely win and capture Lam Tien Tuyat's combined fleet. The island and their 6 countries arrived faster than expected. Kuan has transformed back into her human form. She tsk a few times, full of contempt. It's Tet today, why do people keep coming to donate their hair? But I take this opportunity to enjoy the taste of the island people, let's see. After saying Ku brother, he immediately rushed towards the enemy. But at this time, the dreamer clasped his hands together and told the main that His Majesty did not need to take action himself. The general led Qin Min's men to attack and could take care of these rats. The main heard that and nodded and replied that it was okay. Khan took this opportunity to get a little familiar with the skill of leading troops. Qin Ming's soldiers had begun to fight with the people of the barracks. They shouted with determination to repel the combined fleet protecting Huaha's territory. Lam Tien Tuat flew up high, then stabbed the tip of his sword straight into the ground, using an extremely sharp ice move that suddenly rose from the ground and penetrated the crowd of island barracks. The screams of pain immediately echoed. At this moment, Gaku Zibasaki arrived. He released a stream of fire from his hand downwards, curled his mouth and said that ice cannot resist fire. When he saw his leader appear, the soldiers of the barracks happily shouted Oka motorbike, long live the general, long live the general's motorbike umbrella. Lam Tien Tuat Thu was caught off guard and was thrown back for a while. She frowned and silently said that she was a person with fire-type magic that completely overpowered her ice-type magic. Lam Tien Tuat was extremely confused because she had not found a place to set foot to regain her balance. At this moment, a hand wrapped around her body to support her. The voice of Kuan rang right next to someone's ear. Did it you bang he? Are you okay? Lam Tien Tuat turned to look at the person behind and stammered, now is not the time to tease. Put Lam Tien Tuat down. 9 brothers once again flew up high and stood facing Gaku Zibasaki and said, playing with fire, I'm the one who's really in the profession, look carefully and learn a bit. Gaku Zibasaki exclaimed suspiciously at the woman, Star. He said with disdain that black and purple toy could also be called fire. I am the real Fire King. After saying this, Gaku Zibasaki waved his hand and released a long snake according to his command. It opened its mouth wide and spewed out bright red flames, hitting the 9 brothers. Kuan raised his eyebrows in disdain and said that he was playing with snakes. Right, that little insect also wants to be compared to my fire dragon. The fire dragon of 9 brothers roared and rushed straight towards Gaku Zibasaki's snake. The fire dragon simply opened its mouth and swallowed the small snake in one breath. Gaku Zibasaki was trapped between the fire dragon's teeth and cried out in horror. His whole body was extremely ragged, his face was dirty. He used his strength to separate the fire dragon's mouth and said in fear that this was not ordinary fire. The burning energy also contained a mysterious dark aura. But below the dream omen, Qin Ming's soldiers began to gather troops, following orders to form a long snake formation to surround the coalition army. A resounding yes, everyone quickly set up a battle formation and then shouted in unison. The Qin Min disciples here swore to behead the coalition army. Pat Tu and Jen were surrounded by this formation. They were a little panicked and leaned close to each other. Pat Tu said that some thugs also wanted to stop the 3 generals of the combined fleet. Sao Jen looked around and continued, ants that pack potatoes don't know how to measure themselves. The guy with the softening skill immediately stretched his body and stretched out his hand to escape the formation. He then quickly jumped up and hit the dream omen. He grinned and said to directly capture the leader who controlled the mob. This risk will be easily resolved. General Manhwa didn't bother to move, just gently raised a hand from his palm. A bright red mark shot out and hit General Manhwa's body, saying obediently stay on the ground and be a human for his juniors. I'm going to practice. When Jen heard that, he got angry and protested loudly, if I put on a costume, I'd think I was a general. When he said this, he immediately used a soft attack like a rocket palm to strike straight at General Dream's seal. Who would have thought that as soon as he touched the mark, he immediately retreated in pain, looking at his swollen hand with tears and snot streaming down his face and exclaimed, do my hands in this world have such hard skills? The dream omen didn't bother to say much, he used his strength and shouted the Dharma seal to fall. Right after that, Jen, who had just been so aggressive and loudmouthed, was immediately beaten to a pulp. I rolled my eyes and said it was just a back and forth move, and Jen has already been defeated. Manhwa quickly shouted for the battlefield to prepare to destroy the remnants of the enemy. The soldiers below immediately responded yes, then raised their weapons and rushed straight towards Pat 2. He shouted in panic, hey, I'm the general of the combined fleet, give me some face and go easy on me. Kuruzu didn't bother to pay attention to his teammates. He approached behind the main without realizing it, thinking in his heart that these idiots don't know that if they want to capture the enemy, they must capture the king first. Main cautiously turned around with a murderous aura approaching. He raised his hand and used a condensing hand to condense air and release it, grabbing Kuruzu Main's body in a cold voice and saying, "Where does a squid flying in the sky come from that dares to be so arrogant in front of me?" Kuruzu was grabbed by the Main's condensed gas and was scared to discover that his body was completely unable to move. What kind of magical power was this? If I continue like this, I'm afraid I'll explode and die. I think I'm lucky I still have a trump card left. Thinking like that, he immediately mumbled my name and summoned a blood-red 5-pointed star-shaped formation that appeared in the sky. This is the summoning formation of the main alien race. Then he clenched his fists and told Kuruzu that he could die, but he hoped that he could summon someone a little stronger. Following the main actions, Kuruzu cried out in pain and then completely fell silent. The soldiers of the barracks below saw a strange scene in the sky and immediately stopped. They exclaimed in horror, "Isn't it that General Kuruzu wants to summon that demon? That thing is a murderous demon god, don't blink." At this time, a horse head gradually emerged from the pentagram-shaped formation in the sky, followed by a dark voice following the summons, coming to the 66th position among the 72 demon gods of the series, Lotus in the demon world. Saimai's unique price. Saimai's is the second 66th of the 72 demonic gods of King Solomon, the rank of Marquis, ruling 20 legions, ruling souls in the underworld of Africa. He can teach summoners grammar, logic and rhetoric, specialize in finding museum types. Main waited for Saimai's riding on horseback to fully appear, then curled his mouth and commented that it was an unexpected joy. Looking at the aura, "You have the power of Kim Dan KY Kim Dan," Saimai's asked in confusion. Main didn't bother to answer him. He held the sword tightly in his hand and his shirt fluttered in the wind. Main said with a serious voice, "Through such a long period of time, there appeared an equal opponent with me betting on my honor. The cultivator of this battle vows to win."